It's crazy. These people are deranged, wicked. Satan has his hands all over their souls.
Which side are you on? Which side are you on?
Bosses are really upset about the idea of having to protect their workers from the heat. They're really upset about this. And so there was this, last year, the Biden administration proposed a rule about heat protection. And it put forward some standards about how, how employers should protect their workers from the heat. There was a hearing last week about OSHA kind of generally, but a lot of the conversation really focused on this heat rule. So I'm not going to tell you what the rule is right now. Let's just listen to how these politicians and bosses are reacting to this heat rule, and then let's kind of hypothesize about like what, they seem really upset. What could they be being asked to do? So this is how the bosses and politicians reacted, are talking about this heat rule that was proposed by OSHA last year.
And the proposed heat standard, while addressing a real concern, takes a one-size-fits-all approach that fails to account for a wide range of conditions and different industries and regions.
One problematic regulation is the proposed heat rule. A one-size-fits-all heat standard ignores the work manufacturers already do to protect our employees, and it ignores the unique ways in which it is done. When it comes to heat, what makes sense for Maine does not make sense in Texas.
As currently proposed, OSHA's heat, illness, and injury prevention rule is unworkable, overly prescriptive, and out of step with the practical realities and operational needs. It's a one-size-fits-all framework that fails to account for a wide variation in work environments across the industries, including differences in job functions and geographic climates.
It would definitely increase cost and likely decrease productivity. So it's going to get in the way of making progress on the things that we're trying to do.
Mr. Parson, so to be clear, your organization, y'all are advocating against the heat standard as proposed under the last administration. Is that correct?
That's correct.
The Biden administration's OSHA issued a rushed proposal on heat injury and illness prevention that had the potential to wreak havoc on businesses and communities across the country.
To wreak havoc. I think she misspoke. She misspoke there, but that's okay. She meant that this rule would wreak havoc. Wreak havoc on businesses. I mean, this sounds like a pretty big rule. Like what, Adam, I hope you're not looking at the show notes too closely. Do you remember the heat rule? Do you remember what it was?
I do not remember the specifics of the heat rule.
And so they seem really upset about this. Like, what do you think could be generating this reaction among the employer class?
I mean, to havoc. I don't know. I mean, it must, you would think for it to be havoc, it would entail like some severe restrictions on hours worked, or like, you can't let people work outside if it's, above a certain degree. Or
Yeah. Like it would wreak havoc if people were not allowed to work in 95-degree weather.
Right.
Like that would actually be like problematic economically if we didn't allow people to work in 95-degree weather, like in the South, because there's a lot of 95-degree days in the South, right? You got to still work.
Right.
So you maybe it's something like that, right? Maybe the heat rule is something like that. So they did actually say what the heat rule is, kind of the big part of it. And so we've got a clip of somebody explaining this heat rule. So let's play this.
As you know, in the mountains and farmland of Kentucky, where Hinkle operates, employers have adapted to muggy summer temperatures. Kentucky businesses follow federal OSHA standards and are able to meet the needs of their employees as they see fit. OSHA is set to conduct a public hearing on June 16th to review a proposed federal heat standard. The proposed changes include the implementation of a mandatory 15-minute rest break every 2 hours when the heat index is 90 degrees or higher.
Whoa! Hold on. That sounds like communism.
A whole 15 minutes?
A whole 15 minutes every 2 hours if the temperature is over 90 degrees.
Well, the heat index.
The heat index,
It's
yeah,
even
yeah.
more
Oh, yeah,
expansive than you
right,
described, right?
Mhm.
Don't sell it short. Wow.
Yeah.
I could see where that would really just gum up the works. And really, probably doom the GDP.
Yeah, I mean, it really is. I mean, there are a couple of other things, but that is the thing. I mean, that's the thing that he pointed to, right? As the big scary thing. There are a couple of other things, and we'll talk about those, but that's the biggest thing, is that if the heat index is over 90 degrees, you have to give your employees 15-minute breaks every 2 hours paid. That's the huge thing that they were doing all of this stuff. Everybody was so upset about big one-size-fits-all rule. It's going to wreak havoc on businesses in the nation. 15 minutes every 2 hours if the heat index is over 90 degrees. I mean, you have to really, I don't understand how you can kind of sit there and play the victim when the thing that you are opposing is something as simple as this. I mean, it really is. It would even be one thing to say, I'm prepared to follow the law. I think it's just, I think maybe that it should be 3 hours, every 3 hours instead of every 2 hours. I think that would make a little bit more sense based on the data or whatever. But I'm prepared to follow, whatever OSHA ultimately ends up saying. But I just think that every 3 hours would be more appropriate instead of every 2 hours. Like, that would even be like, okay, whatever, fine. Maybe, because I haven't seen the science. Maybe there's an argument that it should be 3 hours instead of every 2 hours. Maybe there's an argument that it should be every hour and a half instead of 2 hours. I don't know. But the OSHA people had presumably looked at the science, right? The OSHA people aren't just making this stuff up willy-nilly. They did it after long periods of comment. They did it after consultations with industry and labor. And so, it's not just coming out of nowhere, but it would be one thing if industry was like, oh, I disagree a little bit around the edges, but, ultimately that's fine. They're literally acting like the sky is falling. Wreak havoc on the economy, right? I mean, that's just like, how do you do that with a straight face, right? I mean, that would be like, I can't, it's almost difficult to kind of, to like think of an equivalent thing on the other side where somebody would be like, the sky is falling over something so small. I don't know. It's crazy. It's crazy. These people are deranged, wicked. Satan has his hands all over their souls.
Hey, 5 seconds. Just wanted to say that this is only possible because of our donors. If you want to see more of this, then consider donating yourself at tvlr.fm/donate.
Let's continue.
Of a mandatory 15-minute rest break every 2 hours when the heat index is 90 degrees or higher. Can you provide some context around how this standard would disrupt employers' heat protection plans, which are working in states like Kentucky?
I appreciate the question. It's a good one and something I've been thinking about a lot in preparation for this testimony. It sounds easier than it would actually be to implement. And so if you think about how that would actually apply in a business like Hinkle or like...
Okay, now let's pause here for a second, because now we've just been talking about how, like, oh, this is such an easy thing, right? This is just such an easy thing that would be... And so maybe Adam, maybe there's something that we haven't thought of, right? It's possible, like, there's just something like some super, like, niche thing that we haven't thought of that would make it very, very difficult to allow people to take breaks once every 2 hours. Maybe there's something that we haven't thought of. So let's listen to this. Let's listen to the boss. Let's see what he says. Maybe he's got something convincing.
Paving, or you're crushing rock in a quarry, to be able to manage the schedule that way, rather than when someone needs a break, they're allowed to take a break.
Huh.
Yeah. And so I think we're not little kids, and so we don't necessarily need a rule that says everything we need to do. We do right by our people. We put safety first, And that's worked great for us, to your point. It's worked well.
I wonder if the bureaucrat that wrote that regulation had ever worked 15 minutes in 90-degree weather doing manual labor.
I don't know.
Yeah.
I wonder if any of you have.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's my first reaction.
So there's his argument is that it would be hard to figure out the schedules. Would it actually be that hard? I don't think so. I was an assistant manager at a restaurant. And so I have made schedules before, actually. I actually made schedules for an entire week for a business of like 30 people. I made those schedules multiple times. And it took me something like 30 minutes to do the whole scheduling for a whole business for a whole week. And he's saying that, like, oh no, it's going to be too hard for me. It's going to be too hard for me as the business owner, as I'm inside. I got to figure out the schedules.
Right. Well, I mean, speaking as someone who has worked out in the heat plenty and has enjoyed union benefits of a mandatory break, it's not that hard. It's really not that hard. When the time comes, you stop working. And if management wants to continue working, that's their prerogative. Mm-hmm. But we don't, right? And that's a benefit of a union contract and having that protection. We have guaranteed breaks every 2 to 2.5 hours, and so we are able to do that. And if they have a problem with it, they can take it up with our steward. But there are so many workers who are not covered by a union contract. Over 90% in the private sector, right? And also I saw the comment from True American about, not getting that currently. Well, you should.
Yeah.
You absolutely should. I mean, something we've talked about on this show is how many state and local government employees are not covered by OSHA, right? In Alabama, they're not. And I know that's the case in some other states as well. So, but this rule is very mild, 15 minutes every 2 hours when it is dangerous heat, is something that can easily be accommodated. Right. You're telling me that you cannot accommodate that, but you put safety first. Mm-hmm. You don't put safety first. You put profits first because you're a company. That's how it works. You are obligated to put your profits first to your shareholders, and that's what you do. And that's why we as workers have to organize for these sorts of protections, whether it's in our union contracts or through federal rules and regulations and laws. Ideally, we're pushing it at all ends to win these sort of protections. And it's critical now more than ever because it's getting hotter. Mm-hmm. It's going to keep getting hotter because the fossil fuel folks would rather nuke our planet
right.
than sacrifice profits, right? We're sacrificing the long-term viability of our ecosystem for short-term profits. It's going to continue to get hotter. We're down here in the South where it's already really hot and humid a lot of the year. And, workers continue to die on the job due to heat. We hear about it all the time. Whether it's
it was
drivers,
something like a 30% increase year over year from 22 to 23. I mean, it's getting more of a problem. Like 55 workers died in 1 year because of heat. Most of those
right,
in the South.
Which goes to, you spoke about the process a little bit, like OSHA just didn't willy-nilly do this. And neither did the Biden administration, right? Mm-hmm. Like, it was pressure, years of pressure built up to this. It was case after case after case of a worker dying on the job that built up to this. But, industry tells us that they can't do it.
Yeah, it is so gross. And it's important to have the, and they've been talking about like, well, why don't you just let the workers take breaks when they need them, right? Why don't just do it when they need them instead of having a mandated break?
How does that work in practice, right?
Exactly. That's the problem, is that in practice, what happens if you say that, workers are allowed to take breaks whenever they want, workers are going to inevitably be pressured by managers not to take a break, they could potentially be discriminated against if they do assert their right to take a break, and they could be retaliated against or fired for that, and managers will pressure them not to take a break. And they may even say, oh, well, you're taking too many breaks. If you just say, like, no, you have to give workers a break every 2 hours for 15 minutes, then the workers will have much more freedom to take advantage of that right, because it's not like they have a right to exercise their judgment. It's like they have a right to a thing affirmatively, right? And that's much easier for a worker to kind of feel like they can stand up, with their back straight and say, no, this is mine.
Yeah, I mean, in the industry, folks say they don't want rules. They don't need rules. They're not children. But, the reality is when you don't have those rules, the workers get screwed, right? It's what you described is also the inequities that show up.
Mm-hmm.
Because Johnny is cousins with his manager. Mm-hmm. He gets to take a break, but you don't.
Right.
Right? It's all those sorts of things that happen. Your manager's cool, so you get to take a break, but this other manager over here is a jerk who, drives them to the ground, so they never get a break. It's those sorts of daily injustices that so many workers face on the job. That's why rules can be helpful. That's why you look for guardrails. That's why we fight for union contracts. Collective bargaining agreements are not the end-all, be-all, but they are important because of that. Because there is a basic floor that is established in the workplace that no, you have to meet these certain guidelines. You have to follow these certain rules. You actually have to follow what the contract says. And if you don't, we're going to hold you accountable. And it's really unfortunate we have so many workers out there who do not have that kind of protection and security, because you shouldn't have to choose between your own safety and putting food on your table. And that is the choice that so many workers in this country, particularly here in the South, face.
Right. So there you go. People are really upset about the rule. And just to button this up, what's unfortunately probably going to be the case is that the rule will be scrapped by the Trump administration, because the Trump administration in so many ways is beholden to employers. You just saw a clip from the Valley Labor Report. We are live every Saturday morning from 9:30 a.m. till 12:30 p.m. And we pride ourselves on keeping all of our content free to everybody so that we can talk to as many working folks as possible. If you support the work that we're doing, you think that it's important, you think that it's good, then consider making a monthly contribution to the project, and you can do that on our website, tvlr.fm.